You didn't just place a bet, you made a spiritual transaction. What you thought was a harmless thrill was actually a shift in trust. They called it chance. Heaven calls it misalignment. You didn't sit down at a poker table. You sat at an altar and made an offering to something that cannot bless you. Gambling doesn't begin with cards or coins. It begins with the quiet belief that God is too slow, too silent, too stingy. So you reach for something faster, something that promises you'll never have to wait, work, or worship again. But every time you gamble, you whisper something dangerous into the spirit realm. I don't trust the provider. I'll take my chances with luck. And the most tragic part? You still think you're living by faith. This isn't just about lottery tickets or casinos. It's about the theology of risk you've built your life on. The false gospel of instant gain. Heaven is interrupting that lie today, because what you've been calling opportunity might actually be idolatry in disguise, and what you thought was a freedom was a trap dressed up like a choice. Today, you'll see what no one ever showed you. Gambling isn't entertainment, it's entrapment. You never intended to serve another master, you only wanted a breakthrough. But spiritual slavery rarely begins with rebellion. It begins with compromise that feels convenient. They told you gambling was just entertainment, a little fun, a harmless game. But you didn't realize that every wager was teaching your soul something deadly. That reward can come without relationship. That blessing can come without obedience. That wealth is just a spin away, not a stewardship away. That's not just bad theology. That's an altar of deception. Jesus said in Matthew 6:24, "You cannot serve both God and money." But gambling doesn't ask you to serve money. It seduces you to play with it. Until eventually, you bow to it without even realizing. It's not about the amount you spent. It's about the mindset you embraced. You stopped believing God would provide, so you started trying to manipulate outcomes instead of trusting His timing. You prayed for provision, but played the numbers. You said, "God, I trust you," but in secret, you were still checking your lucky streak. This isn't just contradiction, it's a spiritual misalignment. Because faith and fortune don't flow from the same fountain. The enemy doesn't need to pull you into dark sin. He just needs to keep you playing games with your hope. And if he can make you think it's just for fun, he's already winning a war you don't even see. God never called you to live off of chances. He called you to live from covenant. This isn't about judgment, it's about alignment. Because what's been stealing your peace wasn't the loss of money. It was the quiet transfer of your trust. You don't have a gambling problem. You have a trust problem. This isn't about cards or dice, it's about trust. Gambling isn't just a habit, it's a confession. It's what you run to when you stop believing that God is enough. It's what fills the silence when heaven feels slow. You didn't mean to drift, but somewhere along the way, the voice of "maybe I'll win" started sounding louder than "my God shall supply all my needs." You weren't chasing millions, you were chasing peace, but gambling never gives it. It mimics provision, but breeds anxiety. It promises thrill, but delivers torment. Every ticket, every spin, every bet was a silent transaction. A spiritual trade where you handed over trust and received uncertainty dressed as hope. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." But you didn't want little by little. You wanted now. You wanted proof that God still saw you. You wanted out of the waiting. So you didn't just gamble your money, you gambled your hope. And every time you lost, it whispered deeper, "See, God isn't coming through for you." But that was never His voice. God doesn't play games with His promises. He doesn't deal in luck. He builds through process, not probability. You thought you had a gambling problem, but what you really had was a broken relationship with trust. And healing won't come by swearing you'll stop. It comes by surrendering where you started doubting. Because until your trust is restored, the addiction will keep reinventing itself in new forms, new names, new distractions. This isn't about gambling. It's about getting your trust back. Luck is a false god, and it's stealing your worship. You've been told it's just luck, a harmless word, a playful mindset. But what if luck has become your substitute for the living God? You don't bow before golden statues, but you still whisper prayers to randomness. Maybe this time. Maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe something will finally work in my favor. That's not just language, that's worship, misplaced, misdirected, and dangerously deceptive. Because every time you credit luck for your breakthrough, you rob God of the glory that was always His. Deuteronomy 8:18 says, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth." Not odds, not numbers, not fortune. Him. But the spirit behind gambling has done something sinister. It's replaced divine faith with demonic superstition. Now your hands reach for numbers instead of promises. Your hope is tied to games instead of grace, and your joy rises and falls on outcomes, not on the goodness of God. You no longer pray, you predict. You no longer wait, you wager. You no longer believe, you bet. Luck isn't a force. It's a counterfeit spirit, a soft whisper that says, you don't need God, you just need better odds. But the truth is brutal. You can't serve two masters. You can't glorify both the cross and the casino. You were never called to gamble your way to blessing. You were called to inherit it through obedience. So today, the altar must be cleared. Every hidden shrine to chance, torn down. Every silent reliance on fortune, exposed. Because what's at stake is more than your finances. It's your worship. Gambling trains you to love the outcome, not the obedience. You didn't start gambling because you hated God. You started because you were tired of waiting, tired of sowing and not seeing fruit, tired of praying and hearing silence, tired of watching others win while you stayed stuck. So you reached for something immediate, something that promised to skip the process, something that bypassed patience and offered payout. But here's the trap. Gambling trains your soul to desire results without relationship, to love the reward but loathe the waiting, to crave the blessing but reject the blesser. It conditions your heart to measure God by how fast He moves and how much He gives. But God is not a slot machine. He's not an algorithm of blessing. He's not manipulated by your need or your fear. In 1 Samuel 15:22, the prophet says, "To obey is better than sacrifice." But gambling flips this. It teaches you to sacrifice your peace, your time, your trust, all for a fleeting chance at something big. And when you don't win, it births resentment. You start blaming God for the loss, even though He never told you to play. Suddenly, obedience feels empty. Faith feels slow. Prayer feels weak. Because you've been discipled by speed, not sanctified by surrender. Gambling doesn't just steal money. It steals your appetite for obedience. Now sowing feels pointless. Waiting feels foolish. Trusting feels naive. But you were never called to live by outcomes. You were called to live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. The moment you confuse blessing with chance, you've already stepped out of covenant and into counterfeit. God doesn't bless what He didn't author. You've asked God to bless your efforts, your plans, your risks. But there's a question you've been avoiding. Did He even authorize what you're asking Him to bless? You can't gamble Monday through Saturday, then come to church on Sunday and pray for financial peace. You can't build altars to luck in secret and expect heaven to endorse the results in public. God is not a silent partner in your schemes. He is a jealous God, and He only breathes on what He initiates. Proverbs 10:22 says, "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and He adds no sorrow with it." But gambling always carries sorrow, shame, anxiety, regret, bondage. If it didn't come from His hand, it will never carry His peace. And if it demands secrecy, it's already outside of the Spirit. You've been asking for provision, but you've been moving without permission. That's not boldness. That's rebellion wrapped in strategy. And here's the hard truth. God will not bless what He didn't author. No matter how much you pray, no matter how desperate your need, no matter how sincere your heart. Why? Because He loves you too much to let you worship a system He never designed. You don't need favor on your hustle. You need alignment with your Father, because what you call survival might actually be disobedience with a justification. Heaven doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to surrender. And when you finally lay down your own methods, you'll see His blessing was never missing. It was just waiting for you to stop writing your own script. You can't carry the cross and the dice at the same time. You've been trying to do both. Walk in faith and flirt with chance. Honor God and hedge your bets. Worship at the altar and whisper to the odds. But the cross doesn't leave room for backup plans. The cross demands all of you, not just the parts that feel spiritual. You keep telling yourself, I'm not addicted. But look at your patterns. Look at your thoughts. Look at how often your heart wanders toward, what if I win? That's not freedom. That's subtle bondage, dressed in casual language. And here's what makes it even more dangerous. You've convinced yourself that because it's not that bad, it's not a big deal. You don't steal. You don't cheat. You're not hurting anyone, but you're hurting you. Because every time you gamble, you reinforce a lie in your spirit that maybe something outside of God can do for you what only God promised to do. And that lie grows roots. It becomes a lens. Now, every financial hardship becomes a justification. Every delay becomes a temptation. Every silence from God becomes a reason to take matters into your own hands. But Jesus didn't die so you could live divided. He didn't rise so you could walk in half-truths. You can't carry the cross and the dice at the same time. You'll drop one, and your life is already revealing which one has your grip. So today, it's not just about quitting a habit. It's about dropping the dice, letting go of the schemes, laying down every system, every shortcut, every cycle that keeps you in chains. Because the cross is not just your salvation, it's your surrender. Freedom won't come from trying harder. It comes from coming home. You've tried to stop. You've deleted the apps. You've made promises to yourself. You've sworn, this is the last time. But the cycle keeps finding a way back. Because this isn't about willpower. It's about a wound. You didn't start gambling because you were greedy. You started because you were empty. Because you wanted control. Because you felt unseen. Because deep down, you were still waiting for a sign that God hadn't forgotten you. And gambling gave you something to hold on to. A rush, a dream, a chance. Something you could chase when heaven felt silent. But here's the truth you've been running from. The silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God wasn't withholding from you. He was waiting for you to stop running. You've been trying to fix the behavior, but heaven wants to heal the root. Luke 15 tells the story of a son who wasted everything, not because he was evil, but because he thought blessing could be found outside the Father's house. And just like him, you've wandered. You've chased shortcuts. You've spent what wasn't yours, but the Father is still watching the horizon, and He's not waiting with a lecture. He's waiting with a robe, a ring, a feast. Because freedom doesn't come when you try harder. It comes when you come home. Not just to a place, but to a person. To the one who never gambled with your life. To the one who paid it all, knowing the risk. So, drop the dice. Shatter the silence. Let Him reclaim what chance tried to destroy. Your inheritance was never a jackpot. It was a Father's voice saying, "Everything I have is already yours." You were never meant to live by luck. You were meant to live by lordship. And all this time, what looked like addiction was actually misdirected trust. what looked like rebellion was really a cry for provision. What looked like greed was a longing to feel seen, secure, provided for. But now you see it clearly. Gambling didn't just take your money, it took your focus. It slowly rewired your faith until you stopped believing God was still enough. But today, the lie has been exposed, and heaven is not shaming you. Heaven is welcoming you home. You don't need luck. You need lordship. You don't need odds in your favor. You need your feet on the rock. The silence is breaking. The addiction is trembling, and your inheritance is waiting. If this word pierced something deep in you, if you felt conviction and clarity rise at the same time, don't walk away numb. Don't scroll past this moment. Say it out loud, even now. God, I surrender my trust. I come back to you. And if this message felt like it was written exactly for your spirit, it's because it was. Comment below, no more chances, I choose covenant. Let the enemy know you're done gambling with your soul. Let your voice join the remnant that refuses to bow to the systems of this world. Subscribe if you want more words like this, not just messages, but divine interruptions that awaken, correct, and restore. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a whisper from heaven, and it's calling you home.